Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast with Chris Broholm. This show will inspire, motivate, and teach you how to learn foreign languages the best way. On this show, you'll hear incredible stories from amazing language learners who've learned 5 to 10, even 30 plus languages, as well as industry experts who help shape modern language learning through innovation and research. As we dive into language learning methods, techniques, and apps, you'll quickly discover what works and what doesn't. This is the Actual Fluency Podcast, and this is Chris Broholm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. My name is Chris Broholm. I'm your host, and if you're new here, welcome on board. It's good to have you. In these episodes, we talk to language learners, industry experts, and normal people who's taken up languages as a way to improve their life and have some amazing experiences. So we go around the world and we get the best tips and strategies, apps and techniques to actually learn languages faster and shortcut the process that for so many of us have been a bit of a pain in since the school time. So today we've got a bit of a meta episode. I am joined by my friend Anthony Metivier, who runs the extremely successful memory website, Magnetic Memory Method, where he teaches memory techniques. And he also talks a lot about languages. Obviously, those two are very connected. And if you're interested in Anthony's ideas about memory palaces in particular, if you've seen these grand kind of scenes in movies and TV where the main character looks up in the sky and visualizes a lot of spatial memory. So this is the way that memory champions memorize decks of cards in, I think the world record is something like 16 seconds or something. And if you want to hear a little bit more of that world, you can check out the episode I did with one of the grandmasters of memory just a few episodes back. So go back and check that out. But today we're talking actually about mental health, and we're doing this because Anthony has a new book out called The Victorious Mind, which is a really cool piece of work about kind of holistic mental health. And, the Actual Fluency Podcast is in no way intended to replace kind of normal mental health, let's say treatment or any kind of doctor's advice or therapy or anything. But one of my goals with the podcast is definitely to give people sort of a forum or a place to feel a little bit connected with other people who might be doing language learning as a way to kind of improve their life. And I think in many ways that the success in language learning will mirror success in every other area. So if you're in balance with your mental health, if you're balanced in life, then you will find that your language learning will be better as a result. And I've talked about it on the podcast a few times. If you want to go back through the archives and check out some of the mental health episodes, but I truly believe that language learning can be a great helper because you feel connected to people through languages. You learn languages to talk to people, or to connect with people in any case. And it's kind of like a process that has very tangible improvements and goals, and it gives people like a purpose. You wake up in the morning, and if things aren't going great, then it can be hard sometimes to find a reason to get up. But the fact that you're on this language learning journey to improve yourself and get somewhere, make friends from around the world, maybe you want to come to some of the Polyglot events like the Polyglot Gathering. Obviously, in these times, these Corona times, live events are a bit of a relic of the past, it seems like, but hopefully they're coming back. So that's why I feature this topic on the podcast as well. It's sort of left field, definitely, but I think it's all related, and I've had a lot of positive feedback in the past when I brought up the topic of mental health. So when Anthony reached out and said he had written a book on the topic, and I haven't read the whole book yet, but it's extremely good, the parts of it that I have read. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do like a mental health episode based around the idea of the victorious mind. And obviously Anthony's going to get into what that means. But just a little warning, I guess, ahead of the time, the discussion does go very deep. So if you're in the mood for more of a, let's say, a casual uh, language learning episode about methods or apps or techniques, maybe wait until the next week or find an episode in the archives, because this is extremely deep. We talk a lot about, basically we go like the purpose of life and the existence, and what you how to improve that ways. And Anthony is a great person of authority on the subject, having dealt with mental health issues for a big part of his life. And if I would consider him even more of an authority on that, even over memory, which is obviously his main passion. But he kind of equates the pursuit of memory training with language learning. Those are similar. So what got him out of his rut was the pursuit of memory training, getting better at that, developing systems, and just progress, I think. And I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'd love your feedback on this one. It's definitely slightly experimental, but I had a lot of fun recording this with Anthony, and it definitely made my brain work a little overtime trying to process what he was saying at some times. So hope you enjoy it, and next week we'll have a slightly more traditional Actual Fluency podcast episode, but have fun. This episode of the Actual Fluency podcast is brought to you by Optilingo. You can learn over 18 languages with the guided immersion method. For your free lesson, just go to optilingo.com. That's optilingo.com. All right. Well, on the show today, I've got the memory man himself, Anthony Metivier, and he's from the magnetic memory method. And if you want to hear more about his memory techniques, and specifically, you can go back and listen to some of the previous episodes. He's one of the frequent guests on the podcast. So welcome back, Anthony.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to speak.
Yeah, and the topic today is one that's really dear to me. Some of the regular listeners will know that I've produced a few episodes about mental health, and with the release of your new book, I thought this was a great time to get someone else on to talk about it. And before we get into all that, do you want to give the listeners just the 10-second bio, and maybe give you the little backstory to your own mental health, kind of where that journey started?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's cliche, but survivor, really. I never got the semicolon tattoo that some people do when they make it through, but that's what this is all about. I teach memory, and I teach it passionately to anybody who will listen, because it saved my life. And that allowed me to not only get my PhD when all hope was lost, but go on to get a Mercator research grant in Germany, and visit the Louvre on the ticket of this research grant. And all this time I was very lightly sharing with students the memory techniques, but it all led to the adventure where I started to teach them more formally and wound up writing a book almost by accident, and it being a bit of a hit because of, I think, the passion in it and the truth in it. Because when you really need to solve a problem that is really irritating you, such as a life or death problem, then you kind of hit the nerve, I think, very, very deeply. And I think that's a big explanation for the success of the magnetic memory method, is that it is something that is giving back to save lives in the way that it saved mine.
Yeah, and I mean, I got an advanced copy of the book, The Victorious Mind, and I just had a little peek into it, and you're not messing about. Tell us a little bit about that first kind of you're thrown into it almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a hard scene to share. It's a memory that I'm comfortable with now, but it took a long time to get comfortable with. And, it's just one of many episodes. It may be hard to imagine, or maybe not so hard to imagine, because I still have the long hair and I'm not really that great with clothing choices, etc. But I was quite a vagabond, and I had a lot of other health issues. I was overweight, really bad skin because of not taking care of certain dietary things. And I just was not anything like that I am today. I was a bit of a monster. And it's been such a transformation. And I attribute so much of that transformation to not just memory, but memory linked with meditation. And as Nelson Dellis pointed out, who is a multi-time USA memory champion, he has always thought that memory and meditation go together. But as far as I know, there's really only one other book that sort of touches upon this, but there's never been a full investigation and then linking it to mental health itself and how we can fix depression, or at least maintain it better, manage it better, improve it, so that it's just a speck in the ointment rather than an entire fly or something that is, poisoning everything the way it used to poison everything for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of people now sitting out there, especially in these uncertain times and pandemic times even, who are struggling a bit themselves. But in what is kind of the best time for humans to be alive? We've got the wonderful technology. We can pretty much do anything. Well, most of us can do almost anything we want. Why do you think there's such a big rise in like depression, and like why do we feel terrible in mental health when we really can do anything? We don't have to fear like being eaten by tigers or anything like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue. I'm not going to pretend that I have all the answers, but some of them are quite clear. So we have a lack of what we want because our brains are designed to make us want more than we need, right? We come from the savannah where you need to have as much food as you possibly can have because your body doesn't know when it's going to get more, right? And this is not going to change anytime soon. Humans were animals who needed to hunt and gather, and there was feast and there was famine. So anything that signals to this brain that there is a threat, that there might not be resources, causes all kinds of issues. That's not to mention just the kinds of monitoring the brain does of the environment all the time. So we notice where we are in hierarchies of performance, etc., and that regulates our actual brain chemistry and how we feel. And that's why we are able to change how we feel by manipulating our social positions, by manipulating our perception of immediate gratification and our perception of long-term gratification. But as anybody knows, a lot of that is illusion. The certainty that you have enough for the next 20 years is an illusion, no matter how rich you are. I mean, Richard Branson had his entire island torn apart, and who knows what government decision could have all the money in all the bank accounts also torn apart at any given moment, right? So any sort of certainty that the brain has is almost entirely an illusion, and yet we feel better when we do have it, and when we don't, it throws us into panic. It's normal, in other words.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very comforting to begin with. But so why does it? You're using memory as one of the betterment techniques. Of course, language learning is kind of a similar in that sense. How did you get into that originally? That's such a kind of a left field hobby, if you will.
Well, it isn't coming out of nowhere. It's, I was doing a PhD and I was very, very depressed because I'd had this history of mental illness for a number of years. I almost dropped out of my BA. In fact, I had to take a number of months off to gather myself, learn how to deal with all kinds of antipsychotic medications after a complete break with reality. And then it took the courage to actually go back to school because I needed to write letters to the professors that I'd completely embarrassed myself in front of. I had to, find the wherewithal to show up again on campus with all these people. And, it wasn't as bad as I imagined it would be, but I needed to get there. Now, fast forward a couple of years, I'm doing my PhD, which, I had difficulties even getting into the PhD program because I've got all kinds of wild ideas about all kinds of stuff. And I needed extra support from, it's one of those stories where a professor said, well, how could you possibly reject this PhD application? And because she was a very, very big, she still is, a very big and important and influential, not only professor, but well-loved novelist in Canada, they said, I guess, okay, if you say so. I don't know. But anyway, I managed to get into the PhD program, but it never quite felt good. We have imposter syndrome in the world, and the knowledge that, I wasn't quite right, but I was shoehorned in on the recommendation of a prestigious individual, that was in my head, and I had to figure, like, they keep demanding, what is your dissertation going to be on, etc. And, oh, you have to read all these books, which amounts to, when you put it all together with 2 field exams and a dissertation, to approximately 500 books that you're responsible for. And, you get to choose 10% of them or so, and they choose the rest, and you have to slog through it. And then there's an exam where they're going to test, your abilities. And I'm struggling all the time with this Hebrew that I've decided to do, biblical Hebrew, pulling my hair out. Why the hell did I choose this language? And then the snow comes, a typical Canadian winter. It's super dark. I drink all the time. I swallow my pills with alcohol, which is not a recipe for allowing those pills to help with your depression whatsoever. So not recommended. And then in the darkness, the cold, the snow, the news is talking about bringing the military in to put the snow away because they need tanks or something to push it around. It's so high. I get a letter from the government that says that my student loans are coming due years in advance of my graduation for reasons that I don't understand. And I just go bonkers. And then instead of executing a certain dark plan, I find a magician at the university in York Lanes right in front of the bookstore doing magic tricks. And I think, oh, wow, I remember I used to love doing magic tricks when I was a kid. So I show him a magic trick. I grab the deck. He's blown away. And that's where the adventure starts, because you don't get far into magic without learning about how to memorize a deck of cards. And I could do it, even though I couldn't concentrate on French philosophy. I couldn't concentrate on biblical Hebrew. I could concentrate on videos teaching you magic tricks. And so when I realized that I could memorize a deck of cards, I thought, what if I just put all this stuff on cards and memorize it that way? And that's where the adventure began.
Wow. So you put all your PhD research on like flashcards, essentially.
No, not all of it.
Memorize
not
it.
all of it. See,
of course.
I was also very fortunate that I knew a guy who was a communications philosopher, and he taught me about what's called the rule of redundancy in information theory, which we now often use the term 80-20 rule. And it's very similar to that, which is that most information is redundant. And so if you can just cull out of it the most likely to be important 10 to 20%, that's what you learn. That's what you memorize. And your brain will sort of automatically fill in the gaps. So no, I didn't put all of it on cards.
Right. We're quite a lot of cards, maybe.
Right. And I myself later studied information theory because I did a second MA when things were really humming along, and I did it in communications and media philosophy. And there I came across the rule of redundancy again in a big way. And it's been reasserted, and it's always been in speed reading. It's always been in memory training, but it's hard for people to see. It's hard for them to believe that you actually can know way more by studying less. But that's part of the trick.
Yeah, that's definitely surprising to most people, I would say. But
yes, but we know it's true, right? Because you can watch all kinds of videos all over the internet, and you're like, how are these people so smart? Well, part of the reason why they're so smart is because they don't try to have it all. They focus on very granular specificities, and then they give themselves reflection time. They allow diffuse thinking to connect the dots. And if you read a whole book, but you only memorize 10% of it, well, you're going to have way more of the whole book, provided that you put aside time to reflect. In language learning, if you would just memorize 10 sentences and then go and reflect and have some conversations, regardless of how botched they are, you're going to get way more a lot faster than the person who sits there with an app, blah, 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 da, da, da. Oh, I'll give this one a 5 when I know I should really be giving it a 2 because I don't know what the heck that was. Spaced repetition software, they're not even honest to the process. They're never speaking the language. They never sit there in their quiet and pull from memory what it was that they memorized, if they did memorize anything. And so they never get anywhere. But the people who you and I know, who are just racing along and having great conversations all the time, they 80-20 it all the way,
Yeah.
And they play with it.
Definitely. So the journey of betterment, in a way, is one way to kind of get yourself out of a mental health black hole. And language learning, as well as memory training, I'm sure a lot of other pursuits of betterment would be good. Fitness, I suspect. I have not much experience in that field, but so what is it about these seemingly not pointless, because obviously there is a point to it, but these kind of trivial pursuits that kind of lead into meaning? Like, how do they turn into meaning from, let's say, a magic trick into years later actually building your entire life and business and philosophy and mentality around it, and helping you improve your mental health or your general health?
Oh, well, I mean, this is the question. How do we help people do better when we know that they have to do it, right? So I think that the answer really is that I did stuff, and I did it consistently. I did it relentlessly with an eye to developing meta skills of observing what it was that I was doing. And I'm really just a lucky person because it didn't have to work out this way. And part of the luck is self-generated, because if you continually place yourself in a forest where you're going to run into particular kinds of trees, you're going to wake up, to use that phrase, of some of the spiritual talk, or Sam Harris's Waking Up book for secular spirituality. But if you put yourself in dark forests, you're going to keep running into the kind of trees that keep you in darkness. So there needs to be, at some point, the good fortune to hear a positive message, to know that there are alternatives. And then you need to actually consciously say, I am in, and I am going to do these things. And then you need to do it consistently, and ideally with a bit of observation of the process, so that you can notice what works, notice what doesn't work. And then when you say, oh, that doesn't work, you have the wherewithal to say, but I'm going to try it again later. I'm going to revisit it, because what works on Monday, doesn't necessarily work on Thursday, and vice versa. What doesn't work on Monday might work on Thursday. So, you have a policy of revisitation, and you never throw anything away.
Yeah. But when you're in the darkest hole, then putting on trousers in the morning can be a challenge.
Yes, I know.
what is the kind of, I'm not expecting like a definitive answer, because obviously this is a very fluid area of, I don't even want to call it science, but social, what should we call it? Social observations, I guess, like what happens, the rules of life in a way. Right. How do we take those first steps, or can we? Or do we need does something need to happen to us outside our control before we can wake up and start to take those productive steps?
It seems like that's part of it, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, right? Because every person who's willing to share their story of absolute misery and then how they got out of it with permanence or great stability, I don't know what's coming. The more that we have those stories, the more that we have people willing to pull back the kimono, as Ryan Holiday put it to me one time when we were speaking. We've got to, we've got more chances out there for people to actually see, there is something that resonates with me. Because the whole point here, Chris, is that none of us we don't exist as individuals. We're not lost alone in a forest. We actually are the forest, or the forest that we see appears in us. And so if we can, be fortunate enough to have something like the internet arise and listen to a podcast like you're listening to right now, as I have been fortunate enough to, for example, know about Sam Harris, right? And waking up and a secular approach to meditation, or to know about Eckhart Tolle, etc. This is not explainable. It just appears, right? The question is really that we're asking is, when something appears, how do you get yourself to then do something? And you have to start, I think, with recognizing the good fortune that you even have consciousness in which anything can appear in the first place. I think that's where it begins.
This is the Actual Fluency Podcast with Chris Broholm. Make sure to join the Actual Fluency email club by going to actualfluency.com/join. We'll be right back after these messages.
A big shout out to Optilingo for sponsoring the Actual Fluency podcast here in 2020. Optilingo is a language learning app that features a method known as guided immersion to teach you over 18 languages at the time of recording this segment. And it focuses a lot about speaking and repeating and listening, of course, to get your pronunciation just right. It doesn't bother about grammar, it doesn't bother about long explanations of syntax or morphology or any kind of complicated concepts that kind of hold you back from speaking better. And you can get a free lesson right now if you go to optilingo.com. That's OPTILINGO.com, Optilingo. And if you do decide to subscribe for the full version of each language, like I said, there are more than 18 actually available. It's only $5 a month, so it's extremely affordable as well for the full package. But I'm just really happy they are part of the podcast here in 2020, and it's run by my good friend John T, who kind of stumbled upon the method that the app teaches when he was trying to learn his own heritage language of Circassian, of which there is not a lot of resources out there for. So thank you so much to John T and Optilingo. I hope you give it a try, and let's get back to the action.
You're listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. And now, back to Chris.
And you're recognizing that you're kind of searching for opportunities. I mean, you might not have acted on any of them yet, but you were consciously thinking about looking for those kind of opportunities to move out of where you are and progress. Because I think every human has that. Even the most unfortunate souls, almost everyone has a desire for something better. And I guess sometimes it's a handicap if things are already pretty good, then the desire for better could be a little toxic or very toxic. But I think most people have that. They know that as well. If they're overweight, they probably know that they see the brighter option or the alternative life they could be living. They just need to kind of act on that impulse, I guess. But that's obviously the trick. But I guess putting out a podcast like this, talking openly about depression and the other mental health problems and solutions is one way that people might get a little kick in the bottom to get started.
I hope so. I mean, there are practical things that I did, but I think we do need to start with the fact that for whatever reason, there was a recognition that this is a thing that can be done and I'm going to do it, right? And pain is part of what forced me to make a difference. And I've hit rock bottom a few times in my life. And it is sad that it takes that in order for a change to be made. But, at the end of the day, it is what happened. And part of what I talk about in The Victorious Mind is reconciling ourselves to the fact that we don't get to know all the reasons why things are happening. And nobody ever did. Some people have deluded themselves into thinking that they did, and they do know more than they do. But part of healing comes from, it's not really surrender, but it's just saying, aha, this is it. There is no reason. There is no meaning to it necessarily, but let's seize upon this moment. Like, hey, this guy did a card trick. I don't know exactly why. I just grabbed the deck and started to do a card trick. But part of the secret there is that there's some existing competence in every individual. And in me, that existing competence was card manipulation, right? Mm-hmm. And every person, I believe, has an existing competence in something. And so if they can have a moment of clarity, however they get it, and they go, oh, I actually am good at this thing, it makes me feel better, then that's a bridge, or it's even a platform of stability to stand on. And then while you're in it, you reflect, you do some meta-analysis. What is it here? What is this? And then you may have these insights. I mean, one of the other things that I was tasked with when I was doing my PhD is I had to read James Joyce's Ulysses, right? And this is, one of these things where it's a book about epiphanies, and his whole work is about epiphanies and having epiphanies. And so I don't even know where I'm trying to get at, really, was mentioning James Joyce, other than that guy had a miserable life. He was blind, he was in pain, and yet he still seized the moment, and he talked so much. I mean, in Finnegan's Wake, he says, you can dial all the way back to Adam. I believe that's the exact phrase, dial all the way back to Adam. The dude doesn't have any more answers either. So buck up and, do something. But then what was his competence? Well, his competence was writing. So he just stuck with it. He explored it. He took it to the nth degree, and we now have this great, rich asset that we can all explore because of that. And every person has something like that. I'm convinced of it. It's just a matter of helping them see it, and then they can dive deeper into it, and they can figure out, okay, so what's my avenue for exploration here going to be? And then explore. And you'll open up all kinds of trees and all kinds of forests to bump into, and then you just pay attention. Is this positive? Does this help me? Or is it negative? Is it reasserting this darkness? It's pretty simple.
And then you're open to taking diversions, or being flipped around a little bit, dumping into the what you're meant to do, the work you're meant to do. Like, that might be a lot of ways to get to the kind of place you need to be, or where you're destined to be anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there are places that we are destined to be or not, but the thing that I had as an advantage, and this again comes down to it was chance, is that I had a vision of finishing a PhD, right? And I was hell-bent on doing it until that I almost gave up. But when the dark night passed and I was back on my feet and memorizing now, instead of playing cards, memorizing, architectonic tautology and Alataya and all these bizarre concepts and yada, 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 I was able to return to a vision that I never had for myself, but that was given to me because I had dropped out of high school, also related to depression. And for whatever reason, I decided to go to the prom with my friends to celebrate with them. And one of my best friends in high school, her mother said, when she found out that I actually wasn't graduating that night, she said, "What the hell are you doing? You are one of the, most intelligent people I know. Why are you not en route to becoming a professor?" And, it's a weird story, but later I wound up having the keys to her office at York University, where she herself was a professor, as a little place where I could go to study and have quiet time, etc. So I had an office even when I was in my BA. But nonetheless, I never would have went back to high school after I dropped out. I'm sure I never would have if she hadn't intervened and put this seed in my mind. And here's the kicker, Chris. Every single person you mentioned, we have the internet now. Every single person has thousands, if not millions of people trying to put seeds in your mind, right? You don't need, like I had, an intervention from Celia in Kamloops, British Columbia, who notices that some depressed kid has dropped out of high school when he should be a professor, and puts the fire under my butt and gets me back into high school. You don't need that. You just Google, I want to become X, and you will find an abundance of people telling you that you can do it, right? And maybe there is something to the fact that, she was right in front of me as a real person telling me it. But at the same time, I didn't have the internet back then. All I had was, CBC radio in Canada and a library. So we all have way more resources right at our reach than we can even deal with. We're overwhelmed by it. There's no doubt. But at the same time, if you bring the clarity, there is a path and you can find it. And you can find people who will encourage you. You, Chris, show up all the time. You're encouraging people to learn languages, right? It's not rocket science. So part of it, I don't know the answer, but the answers are there for sure.
Right. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Right. But part of the answer is that there is a vision. You need to have a vision. And Celia, for me, my friend's mom, it wasn't about being a professor. She's just a super smart, accomplished, consistent, stable human being who has great ideas, who speaks intelligently and supports her ideas with evidence. And I just wanted to be that kind of person. And I think that people need to think, who do I want to be like? Who's the superhero model that I can choose to model myself on and give it a try? Try to reverse engineer. What is it that person does? It's probably a lot more clear than you think if you just write it out on paper.
Yeah, but still, we don't always believe what people say to us, A lot of people will encourage, especially parents, of course, usually quite encouraging. But when you're in that dark place, isn't it easy to just kind of, block out everything except I'm not good at anything, I'm, terrible. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, I do, and I've done it myself. It is easy, but it's also tremendously hard. It is so punishing. It is so much pain that it's creating. So it might be easy to do, but it's also hard. And it's primacy effect, and it's also procedural memory. And that's where the hope lies. If you can just get your foot in the door and start to change, you can unwind all of that stuff. I told myself things over and over and over again, but I know now from what I know about memory that it's procedural memory, and procedural memory can be broken. And you can actually use the negativity to help break it by treating it in a slightly different way. And there's a lot of great research around how to do that, which partly I cover in The Victorious Mind. So it's a science-based initiative. But the thing is, you've got to be the scientist in the laboratory of your life, and you have to run the experiments. No one else can do it for you. And that's the catch. And, look, the person who figures out how to lead horses to water and get them to drink, they're not only going to get the Nobel Prize, they're going to buy Sweden. They're going to have enough money to buy all kinds of countries. Forget about, owning your own island. You're going to own your own continent, because that is the mystery that nobody knows how to solve. But we are constantly, every day, working as a species together to try to solve it. And it's a beautiful thing what's happening. And more people are improving if you take some of the Steven Pinker analysis into play. And, there are critics of Pinker. I myself could criticize what Pinker has done in The Better Angels of Our Nature and in Enlightenment Now and so forth. But it's not really worthy to criticize it. The fact of the matter is that things are getting better, and there's never been a better time to seize upon the moment than during a lockdown. It's a numbers thing first and foremost. And part of the problem goes back to it's your brain causing the misery, but you can still have great peace, even though there's chaos everywhere and uncertainty. And if you really poke around in your memory, I think you'll find that actually it was all pretty much uncertain before all of this virus stuff happened. In fact, it may have been even more uncertain for reasons that we could poke into. But now at least we have the certainty of what the problem is, and that we have the certainty of the uncertainty of how we're going to deal with it. And that should be unifying. That should be helpful and calming to people.
Yeah, just to add like a little perspective for me is, there are certain things about the life that I have in this kind of lockdown, let's say, lifestyle. There's lots of things I'd like to do. My first event, the Polyglot Cruise, was supposed to be this weekend as we're recording this. And, I'd love to travel. I'd love to socialize. I don't remember the last time I've seen anyone, but I turn that around and say, okay, this allows me to focus 100% of my work, some of the actual fluency stuff that I've been neglecting, some of the new products that I'm working on, some new initiatives that once the virus is over, I might be a little bit overwhelmed by everything else to make proper progress in. But because I can literally only wake up and stay in my apartment, I might as well put in productive work. And when I put in productive work, I mean, that's what we're talking about here, but really is betterment is, in my opinion, productive work towards a result that motivates you to keep going and keep doing it. So for me, and of course, I don't want to downplay the tragedy of how many people are dying, people are losing their grandparents, and the health services are overwhelmed, and it's not a good thing. I don't want to sit here and say that I like the fact that there's a global pandemic, but it is there. I can't change that. So the only thing I can change is how I feel about the situation. And it's easy. It will be so easy for me to say, "Oh, I'm in a studio apartment. I'm sitting on a nightstand in the kitchen as we're recording this, and life is miserable and it sucks. And I'm just going to put on Disney Plus and eat popcorn in bed and order pizza all day." But no, I'm saying, you know what? This is the time to put in an obscene amount of work, and then when the whole world opens up again, I can take a 3 months vacation, and I wouldn't be guilty about that. In fact, I'm looking forward to that. So looking at I guess what I'm trying to say is that, and obviously there won't be a pandemic all the time when people listen to this episode, hopefully. But what I'm trying to say is, even in what seems like the worst of times, you can always find positive things, and you can always wiggle your way out of almost any situation. So that's what I'm doing in this pandemic, and I like it so far. I mean, ask me again in a couple of months, I'll probably have a lot of cabin fever, and I'm probably anxious to travel again. But right now it's good to get some work done without any distractions.
Oh, that's exactly the spirit to have. What other option is there other than to do the best that you can, show up, and allow yourself to set the stage for the future to come, even if you don't know what that future is going to look like, right? And have an image of, a 3-month vacation or whatever that case may be. And there's great science behind, the role of mental imagery in your future, in, just anything that you want to do in terms of setting up a kind of person or metaphorical image that represents what you're trying to achieve. And that's as true now as it will always be.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert, and I'm definitely not, the most productive person in the world, even in these circumstances. But it's all it's all relative to my own perception and perspective. And I just feel so fulfilled when I've given it my all, And the fact that we're recording this podcast right now is, I think, a good example of this kind of endurance or persistence in improvement, because I could have said to you when you asked if we could do an episode about mental health and your book, and I could have just said, you know what, times are really bad now. I don't have anywhere to record. My fridge is noisy. My neighbors are going to think I'm weird for talking to myself in my room. I could have put out 100 excuses and just put the podcast on a break for longer. But I know it's already been a couple of weeks since I made another episode. The show must go on. And even though I'm doing a lot of other work with, writing and making videos as well, I did this too. So I want to give people that encouragement that, you can do more than you think.
Oh, for sure. Well, look, I had my level 4 Chinese course at the Confucius Institute canceled. And I was really looking forward to keeping continuity because, we often talk about how you don't need to go to language learning classes. But in this case, I really like what Confucius Institute has done and how they do it. And I sort of went to just do some research on language learning courses, and I wound up absolutely, overjoyed by the experience. And plus, they were very complimentary because they said, "Oh, you've never taken a Chinese course? How is it that you're this good? We have to put you in at least level 3, maybe level 4." And I said, "No, let's do level 3." Right. And I thought maybe I should just start at level 1. But in any case, I can't go to level 4 this semester here in Australia because it's canceled. Right. And there's just no option. And yet there's endless options for me to study Chinese. So every day I study Chinese anyway. Right? Even though it's not what I had in my mind as the ideal thing, I wanted to go and see my teacher again. And I really like that they don't really speak any English, very minimal English. I like that they write characters on the screen instead of pinyin, and they only put the pinyin as a last ditch measure. And I love all that stuff. Like, it's really cool. You don't get that on the internet, but there are ways to emulate it, and there are ways to continue studying Chinese. And I'm still studying every day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that progression and just sticking to it is really what causes the results. One thing I was curious about is, what is your definition of the victorious mind?
Oh, that's a good one, because some people have said, that title is a bit unclear and also not exactly attractive, because who wants victory? But I'll tell you, the victorious mind is the mind that makes it happen and conquers itself, right? So whatever it is you want to do, it figures out, first of all, do you really want it? And then it figures out how to get it so that you can accomplish it in the most reasonable way, in the way that causes the least amount of suffering, ideally no suffering at all. But there is, sometimes a little bit of pain in, exercise, for example. You've got to make those muscles work. So the victorious mind figures it out. And also, I guess what I would say is the victorious mind realizes that there is no mind at all in the end, which can be a bit philosophical and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But if we look at the neuroscience, you and who you think you are just simply don't exist. It's an illusion that is created in real time. And so much freedom I've experienced personally is by simply deconstructing the idea that there is a guy named Anthony Metivier and letting it go. And this is so blissful. And I can't even begin to describe how much peace and freedom I've had by not thinking at all, or thinking less, or when I thinking in a completely different way that I didn't even think was possible. So we should, maybe get into what that is, but that's what a victorious mind is. A mind that thinks only good things when it thinks at all, and is able to turn off on demand.
I was, when you said that, I was reminded of 2 different quotes. There was one, I forget who said it. I can't remember the attributions for these, but one of them was, the fight is in your mind. It's not in your checkbook. It's not in your savings account. It's not in your house. It's in your mind that the fight has to be taken.
Right.
And the other one was, I think the other one is often attributed as an African proverb, but it's like, if there are no enemies within, the enemies outside can do you no harm.
Right.
That's what I thought when you said victorious mind, because I really feel like your mind has these bullshit fences and barriers that it constantly puts up to, apparently save you from this mortal danger of being great. And the only way that I've been able to create anything, I mean, here I'm just talking about a blog post or a YouTube video. I'm not talking about creating like an empire or anything, but just creating one thing has been because I could silence that mind for just a little bit and just say, yeah, I see your concerns, but what if I just did it?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of worrying about it, instead of overthinking, instead of planning too much, what if I just do this and then we'll see? And that's been life-changing for me because I'm a chronic overthinker. Like, I will plan for years and years and never do anything. Or I will say, yes, next week I will do this, or tomorrow I will do this.
Mm.
And tomorrow doesn't exist, of course. So the only way to get anything done, I feel like, is just to do it and silence the mind. Just don't even acknowledge it.
Well, it is a good strategy, and there's a science to how that you can get yourself there. And that's what The Victorious Mind is, as a book, is what is the science of this? And surprisingly, it's thousands of years old, or not surprisingly. And it works very, very simply. And it starts with two simple questions that I learned from Dr. Gary Weber. And they are these. Are my thoughts useful? How do they behave? And if you make a conscious and consistent practice to just ask those two questions, I happen to ask them in Sanskrit, but I think they work in English too. There's reasons why I think Sanskrit gives it an extra punch, but are my thoughts useful? How do they behave? You can ask them in any order. It's so tremendously useful because it causes you to stop and say, well, no, these thoughts are not useful. And they're behaving like a childish little kid who isn't getting what it wants. And then that causes them to lose some of their venom. And then you get this meta state where you're analyzing the experience of thought itself. And then sometimes you have useful thoughts and you ask the question and you go, well, that is a useful thought. Hot damn, I'm going to do something with that, right? And this practice is something you can get in your procedural memory, which is what I did every day. I still, to this day, it's now 3 years later, every day, Chittameva Mahadosham, Chittameva Hi Balakaha, Chittameva Mahatmayam, Chittameva Mahanasat. I can go on for an hour. It's these questions, and they're beautiful questions, and they help you to just stop being at the mercy of your mind and focusing on this moment now, and then crafting a better plan forward because you have tools that help you assess whether your thoughts are useful or not.
Would you say that self-sabotaging, like that as a word, is what people who are not living up to their potential or their own personal potential, is that essentially what's happening? It's the mind is self-sabotaging any kind of productive effort, any kind of progress, like perpetually, to the point where you just get knocked out and you just exist, but you don't live.
Well, self-sabotage is a term, and it's one of many possible terms. And the individual needs to sort of figure that out for themselves. Am I sabotaging myself? Or they can just look and say, what's the status quo here? If I were to just leave the terminology behind, what is actually going on? And get an assessment of it without thinking that a term or a label is going to fix you. The label manic depression never helped me. Did I self-sabotage because I constantly thought of myself as a manic depressive? Well, yes, at some level, yes. But there's a deeper sort of thing. It's not really self-sabotage. It's actually productive performance of an image, of an idea. So the idea of manic depression had to go in order for me to stop performing it, right? Because I don't think
perpetuating.
Yeah, I don't think it was sabotaging me. I actually think I took great pleasure in playing out the role of the manic depressive because, I get to be like Mr. Jones, played by Richard Gere, or I get to be like, all kinds of famous people who are a bit zany and crazy, Robin Williams, etc. Right? There's part of me that actually enjoyed this production of the mentally ill person. And that is part of the sickness. It's part of the problem, actually, in not just the stigmatism that people have around mental illness, but the stigmatism they place on themselves. And I don't think it's as easy as calling it self-sabotage. I actually think it comes with a tremendous amount of pleasure, precisely for the reasons that we started with. People want certainty. Their brains are rigged to make them seek it, create it, and no matter how false that certainty is, it feels better than being uncertain. Because when I took away the label of manic depressive, well, then what am I? Oh, well, what remains is just bliss. When you take away all the words.
Isn't that scary, though, in a way?
It is, actually.
I mean, you said bliss, but I would say this is something that I thought about obesity as well, and I think it also goes for people who have alcoholism or smoking addicts. I call them smoking addicts. So other people call them smokers, but you have an image of yourself. You can't see yourself without the vice, as it were. So it's better for the mind to keep doing what you know is bad because you don't know who you are without it.
I think that's true. Yeah. I mean,
that's challenging.
I had alcohol issues myself, and Amy, who edited, was the substantive editor of The Victorious Mind. She told me that after she read it, she quit drinking, and she wrote this lovely long email about how she noticed that there was this character inside of her, the Amy who figures out, oh, well, this fish should have white wine. Oh, but then I have to go all the way across town to get the white wine that I want that goes with this fish. And then she starts to rearrange all the things in life about the kids getting here, there, and the other place. And then all kinds of stress and pressure comes. For what? For white wine. Because there's a character named Amy who thinks that white wine belongs with this fish, right? And that sounds like a silly example, but isn't that what people are doing to themselves day in and day out, 24/7, this little committee in the mind? Oh, well, I want a boat for my retirement, but then I got to, now sell this car in order to have the interest rates make it, whatever stuff that goes on in people's minds. There's like this endless shuffling. It's a series of exchanges, and it's all in the service of an identity that you yourself are participating in inventing. And yes, it's scary to let it go, because the consequences of letting it go is I actually don't know who the hell I am, and I have no idea what's going on. So let's rebuild this machine from the get-go and see what happens when I allow myself to just, well, like you said earlier, be a bit like the leaf blowing in the wind, right? Because you'll find that there's just consciousness, and your body appears in your consciousness by all observation. It may be that your body is producing your consciousness, and therefore your consciousness is in your body. But really, the way we perceive the world, the body is something that appears to us as individuals. And if you let go your idea of who that us is, pain changes. It even disappears. Problems change. They even disappear, because they have to. When there's nobody home to have the lights on, there's just light.
It's very
stuff,
deep,
right? It's weird.
It's very deep. I'm just catching myself saying, like,
I know. It's
interesting.
It's like an anti-marketing event. Oh my God, I'm going to read a book about this stuff. But it's true. You're going to change if you do these things, and you're gonna go through a bit of, wow, this is a bit freaky. What's happening to me? Because there is no me, and it's weird. It freaked me out. But it was such a short little period of being weirded out. And then all of a sudden this fullness came. And the fullness is guaranteed if you do the meditations I teach, because the breathing itself is going to get more blood into your brain. And we know, certain parts of the brain are involved in the production of the ego. So there's a task positive network, and there's and that's where we get the zone that Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was so famous for describing. And then there's the default mode network of the brain. And literally these practices stop you from being in this default mode network that says, I, me, tomorrow, yesterday. Oh, I wish that I was on the beach now, etc., instead of being involved in the now, right now. And when you get into the zone, which is what the Victorious Mind teaches you how to do, there's no time for I, me, because everything's taken care of, and you know what to do. You know how to do it. There's an interesting woman who has spoken about this, who just said, I only ever just did the next thing that was the most obvious thing to do, which is what we do anyway, but we have our ego in the way.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about meditation, because that was also, I believe it was in the title, or at least you put it in the description,
Yes.
as a big part of it. So,
You mean you haven't memorized the title, Chris?
Yeah, shame on me.
The full title?
I need more memory tips.
Right.
But yeah, I need to find a guy who knows something about memory who can teach me a little bit. But I think a lot of people think of meditation as this kind of like wooey morning routine kind of, put butter in your coffee kind of science. Can you just share a little bit deeper about, you just started there with saying how it helps you breathing, kind of get to the right parts of the brain, but what is it in exact detail that causes meditation to be part of this? Like, where does it fit in with what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, it's a very good question and an important one. So the subtitle to The Victorious Mind is How to Master Memory, Meditation, and Mental Well-Being. And these things are coming together because there's a problem in language, and we see this in English a fair amount. So we talk about capitalism, but there's actually many forms of capitalism. So it should be called capitalisms, right? Same thing with meditation. Right. There's many forms of meditation, so we should really be talking about meditations. And so there is sitting meditation, where you would focus just on the breath in a particular part of your nose. There is meditation where you would do some sort of gratitude journaling. There is meditation where you would perhaps do a loving kindness, empathy meditation, where you would just project love to other people. There's meditation where you would do some yoga movements. There are meditation where you would chant. There's meditation where you would chant and do movement with your hands, which is called mudras. There is an abundance of kinds of meditation. And what we know is that a lot of people, and this is research findings, so I don't mean we know it with great certainty, but we know it from scientific studies, that there's a trend, a tendency for men, for example, to be very attracted to intellectual kinds of meditation that actually locks them outside of the goal that they're trying to achieve, because men need to have more movement. They need to have more yoga. They need to have more dancing around and chanting and stuff like that. Whereas women are often attracted, so the research has shown, to more of the movement yoga type meditations, and they may do the singing and the chanting, but they would benefit a heck of a lot more if they would do more of the intellectual stuff. So it's one of these weird mysteries of nature where we're often attracted to the very thing that's leading us away from the goal rather than towards the goal. So a lot of the best meditation teaching says, no, we need to have a stack. We need to explore multiple things. We need to mix and we need to match. And we'll find you the boat that gets you to the island of feeling better, right? A mental well-being, as I think of it. We'll find it, but you got to be willing to explore multiple boats and multiple islands that once you get there, and then you never stop, right? So it's not like, oh, okay, I got me my meditation and I'm good for life. No, it's, well, you got there. Now where do you want to go next? You know, I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, I climbed to the top of the mountain only to see the next mountain to climb. And this is what Zen is. Zen means find the starting point. And so you find the starting point again and again and again. And now a lot of people will think, well, then how is that ever going to help me? Well, this is the same thing with language learning. Anybody who thinks they're going to get fluent in a language, they've got to give their head a shake. They're not even fluent in their own mother tongue, right? So,
you mean fluent as in perfection here, just to clarify?
I've seen the Oxford English Dictionary. I don't even know a tenth of it. I probably don't even know a fifth of it, right? Yeah. So the whole idea that I'm ever going to master English is just a non-starter. And it's the same thing with like meditation. Oh, I'm going to master meditation. Well, I put that title there because that's just the title that came to mind, right? How to master memory, meditation, and mental well-being. But mastery truly is not control. It's not completeness. It's being complete by being consistent in your practice and multivariant. So what I teach you there in the Victorious Mind is these different forms of meditation, what each one should theoretically bring you, but if it doesn't, move on to the next. and then the next and the next and the next. And if you are devoted to this, as in learning a language, you will find the way. And then you'll find out what consciousness really is. You'll find out what language really is. If you do apply it to the language learning metaphor, which I learned a lot of Sanskrit in order to do this, and I found out a lot about what Sanskrit really is and what it isn't. And I now also have the humbleness to say, I have no idea what any of it is, but I've certainly had a great intimacy with it. And this is the intimacy that I have. Let's get some more. Or no more. Let's do something else. New boat, new island.
Yeah. And really appreciate that. Just to round things off, I wanted to just add a little perspective as well from my life. Is some people, I'm sure, are listening to self-improvement books or podcasts, or even the two of us here, and they might envision that mental well-being is a destination, like you reach somewhere and then suddenly you're just always happy and you're always great. My own personal experience, and I'd love to hear what your experience has been like, but for me, it was like when I was in a really bad place, really super depressed with nothing to do, nothing going for me, just eating pizza, playing video games. The dips were like, they stopped life. You basically just lie on the couch, just watching that. Well, we didn't have Netflix back then, but crying and, you're just kind of not working at all. Whereas the good days, you might go out for 10 minutes. That was like the good stuff. But now, after years of working on myself, even though there are still dips, the kind of bottom has been raised up significantly to the point where when I feel bad now, it's like when I was feeling amazing back then. So like the bar has been raised so much. But it doesn't mean that I'm impervious to feeling terrible or, doing things that I shouldn't be doing, like eating too much pizza sometimes, or, lots of things or skipping the productive things. But that's basically been my experience. And what that taught me is that anything worth doing, you never stop doing. It's not like, for instance, people use this in weight loss a lot. It's like, I'm on a diet. Actually, you're always on a diet. You might be on the pizza and burger diet, but no matter what time, what your eating habits are, you are on some kind of diet. And if you are struggling with weight, you will be on a diet for the rest of your life, like everyone else on the planet. So it's your choice to what that diet looks like. And the idea that, I'll just be on a diet for 6 months, and I'm down to what my BMI tells me I need to be, and then I can stop dieting. And it's like, no, that's where it probably gets even harder, because then you get the yo-yo effect. You get the kind of the people fall back and have all sorts of relapses, and that works for anything, alcoholism and drugs and everything. But so that's my experience, that it's all a continuum, and getting better at writing, getting better at podcasting, it's all a continuum. I'm never going to be perfect in anything. I just have to keep working at it, and the rewards come continuously. It's not like you make 100 podcasts and then you get like a big prize and a medal and $1 million and wow, you have podcasted now. No, there's another 100 episodes, So that's sort of my experience, just to round everything off there.
Yeah. Well, perfection is in the doing, right? If there is such a thing. But it's just a word that appears in consciousness that, can be, is it useful? You can ask that question. Is the word perfect useful? So myself, I love what you say about raising the bar, because right now I have shoulder bursitis. I've got silent acid reflux that's really challenging. My mouth is on fire all the time. I have no quick path to a solution because it's not the time right now as we're speaking to go to the doctor's office, and I sort of just have to put up with it and deal with it, right? But yesterday I was feeling a bit down about this, and I just asked myself, what use is this feeling? Why is this feeling appearing? And I just said, well, go back to the program. You haven't done your meditation yet, and the next thing you know, I'm back. I'm in the park doing my meditation thing, and then I'm back in the Magnetic Mary Method headquarters, humming along like usual. And the little dark cloud just went away, but it went away because I have tools. And the reason why I have tools is because I showed up to build the tools. And then I realized, hey, I know this guy who helped me with my health before. Yes, I can't go and get a blood test right now, probably, but I bet you he has an idea. I texted him and he's like, yeah, I'd love to help you. He's like a diet nutrition coach who helps with digestive issues like I have with whatever I have. I have also psoriatic arthritis. I got every problem under the sun. I got every reason to be miserable right now, and all the more so miserable because I can't go and see my GP without risking exposure to the plague, right? But he got back to me right away, and he's like, yeah, we can figure something out. Definitely, let's figure this out. So, through the magic of the internet, there's options, but I never would have been able to see that in my own memory, there's a path to a solution if I hadn't been able to ask these questions. Are these thoughts useful? How do they behave? And now let's get back to the program, And so it's something anybody can achieve. The thing is, you just have to surrender yourself to the fact that you are in your body. It's the one that you got. You're the steward of it, and that ain't going to change. There's nothing going to change it. This is just the way it is. Heidegger called it thrownness, Geworfenheit, I think it was in German. You're thrown into the world, and your best bet is to figure it out. And I hope that I hope that some of the things that I'm able to say help people. But at the end of the day, I'm just another guy who's also thrown into the world, and I need to figure it out too. And I just have found stability. I have found consistency. And yes, there are dips, but like you said, and it's a brilliant way of putting it, by raising the bar has been raised, and it's difficult to topple. Can it be toppled? Yes, but we're going to show up to our best ability to make sure that it never is, and it keeps going higher and higher, noticing that higher and higher is just an image that appears in the mind, and it happens to be a useful one. So let's explore it.
Yeah, and also just having not overcome it, but having survived that dark time. I know I have it, I've done it once, so therefore I know I can do it. It's like from, what movie was that where it was a time travel movie where they have to do something really complicated or something really stupid. Maybe it was a Harry Potter movie, I'm not sure, but the time travel is like, how did you know how to do that? Well, I saw myself. Oh, it's Doctor Who, I think, probably. I saw myself do it. So he traveled back in time, met himself, like a future version of himself, and the only reason he knew how to solve the problem was because he saw himself doing it, many, many, many years ago when this episode was going. And I feel like that provides me with a great deal of comfort, is that if I start to feel down, I remember how I felt back then, and I'm like, you know what? I dealt with this once before. There's no need to go through like 9 months of misery. That's not productive. I'm just going to get back to the program, as you say. Just keep on trucking.
Oh, well, I'm glad you mentioned movies, because the reality is I used to be a film studies professor, and all I used to talk about back then was how the movies are trying to teach you how to live better. You are the one, as in the Matrix. And
Matrix.
All the Matrix is trying to get you to observe is that reality appears to you as a code. And if you can see the code, you can manipulate it. But if you're not willing to let Morpheus say, come on for the ride, let's see how deep how far down the rabbit hole we can go. If you're not willing to take that pill, you're going to be trapped in the Matrix forever. But if you just see and observe that the world is constantly trying to show you the way, and you're open to it and you explore, the way will unfold in ways that will amaze you, delight you, and set you free, to use a cliche. And I know it's a cliche, but if you don't have any other program, I know 32 verses in Sanskrit. I know a lot more than that now, but I talk about these in particular for a reason in The Victorious Mind. Read Dr. Gary Weber. That's who I read. In some sense, The Victorious Mind is a love letter to how he helped accelerate my own meditation practice to the point that, I'm just like, wow, I can't believe how much bliss I have all the time. There's a program there. It might not be the right one for you, but it is well worth your attention. And make sure you show up for 90 days, because we know from neuroscience that that's how habits are formed. And that's a bare minimum for sure in terms of practice, which is a very, very small amount of time to pay for complete freedom.
Yeah, what a way to finish. Thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on the show and talking about these very tough and in many ways taboo topics as well. We're still not seeing too much about it out and about. And, definitely the first part of the book, the part that I did manage to get into was definitely eye-opening, and you're not, like I said, holding anything back. So thank you for that. And the last is, where can people find out more about you? Where can they get the book? I assume Amazon and all the usual places.
Yeah, if you want a link that will take you to the Amazon store in your nearest country, go to magneticmarionmethod.com/VM, B as in victorious and M as in mind. And, one of the things that I'm hoping to do when I promoted over the years, this word promotion, is I want to encourage people to give copies to their doctors, because my initiative is to start to communicate to medical professionals that these are options. I know that a lot of them know that they're options, but to really help them understand the gravity of how helpful that it can be to know that there is good scientific research behind it. There's research going on as we speak. I'm now in a 45-day research program on meditation myself with a doctor named Jeffrey Martin, and contributing data to it from my own meditation practices. And I want so badly to have this in the hands of teachers, doctors. Doctor is just Latin for teacher, right? To help people know that there is an alternative, or there is potentially a supplement to any sort of traditional or, psychotherapeutic or psychotropic or whatever kind of program they're giving. There's something that can actually help you just with the mind part, so that you aren't suffering so badly and you have more help as you figure it out for yourself. So if you do go to magneticmarionmethod.com/VM to get it, please keep that in mind, that this is about more than you and me. This is about more than anything marketing. It's an attempt to really help as many people as possible and get it in the hands of doctors and teachers for those people that they are there. So they have some of this knowledge that they can pass forward, and hopefully based on their own practice as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
This episode was brought to you by Optilingo. Learn over 18 languages through guided immersion by going to www.optilingo.com. That's OPTILINGO.com.
Thanks for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast with Chris Broholm. To get more language learning tips, strategies, and inspiration, join the Actual Fluency email club by going to actualfluency.com/join. We hope you enjoyed the show and hope you've gotten some useful information. Till next time, this is the Actual Fluency Podcast, signing off.